Welcome back, everybody. Nathan the Barbarian with you. This is Hot Mike. Welcome. Come on in. We are Cincinnati based, but we talk a lot about Cincinnati politics, but we also talk about national politics and especially how it impacts Cincinnati. Welcome back. Joined by the regular crew. Kevin, the voice of reason, is with us. Aldridge, how you doing, sir?
Doing good. Happy Tuesday.
Good to see you. Tarris, Troy, Horton, how you doing,
What's
sir?
up? Glad to be here in this beautiful day in Kentucky.
Yes, it is. And sexy Phil Heimlich.
Do you think it's possible I could request a different nickname? Do I
Yes,
have a right to do that,
you do, but I also have a right to revoke.
Kevin got to choose his own? The voice of reason. I didn't get to choose mine.
Okay, we'll give you.
The
Hey, choose
sexiness
whatever.
chose you. The sexiness just chose you, Phil.
That's right.
Wow. Well, you know something, Terrace? If the shoe fits, wear it. I guess maybe
There it
there's
is.
some
There it
truth
is.
there.
Good to see you, everybody. Let's jump straight into it. It's a lot to talk about. Let's start with what everyone's talking about right now, and that's what's happening in California, where a few days ago, 4 or 5 days ago, you had people who were protesting ICE. Well, I won't call them raids, but ICE arresting people. People have a lot of strong opinions about it. See, it appeared to about 4 days ago go out of hand. To my eye, and what I have read, again, I'm not in all media. It appeared that the state of California had been dealing with it, and then Trump decided that he wanted to send in the National Guard, which, to my limited legal knowledge, appears to be illegal. But we can get into that. And since then, he's also talked about and actually put Marines on the ground in California. Let me just play just a real quick clip for you, and not all of it, of what the scene looks like. And I'm sure many people have seen similar scenes on your phone and or your television screen over the last few days. And I think I get the gist of it. But hold on one second here. Let me turn this off. There it is. So a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions. I'm not surprised that Ground Zero is in a so-called blue state, especially California. But what is your take about what is happening in California right now? Some people think that Trump's move is justified, bringing in the National Guard, putting military Marines on the boots on the ground. Some people feel like it's all a political stunt. What do you think?
Well, I definitely think it's a political stunt. Let's not forget this is something that Trump wanted to do in his first term, but he was denied. If you remember, he wanted to do this during some of the George Floyd protests, getting the National Guard and sending the military. Look, I mean, it's commonly understood in this country that it's not a good look to have your military on city streets. In fact, you try to avoid this except for under the most circumstances, mainly because you never want the look to be that the military is going against and attacking its own people. It's one of the things we criticize other nations for, whether that's gassing or assaulting military on the average citizens. That's just something that we don't do in this country. But again, Trump and his endless pursuit of trying to look like a strong man, like some of these other dictators around the world, wants to show just how tough he and this is just this is par for the course for what he likes to do. These shows of bravado or things that he perceives as strength. That is what this is, and it's also an opportunity go up against one of his political nemesis in Gavin Newsom out there in California. So this is an opportunity for him to really stick it to liberal California and Gavin Newsom, a guy that he doesn't like. So I'm not surprised that Trump would do this. He wouldn't do this probably in a red state or in some place like that. But there's off a lot of boxes for him, and I don't think it's a good look.
I want to jump in behind Kevin, and I agree with most of what you said. But I mean, it's political, and it's also I think the right thing to do, because it is a political stance, and I could see if they were protesting about things and people that had to do with America and American citizens, but they're walking around, and I do know, and I understand the optics of all of this. But I'm gonna try to keep it in the now. When I see people walking around here and walking around destroying California, walking around with Mexican flags, with flags from Mexico, not American flags, but Mexican flags, destroying American soil, to me, that triggers, it seems like war. So what is Donald Trump doing when it seems like, and this is all, it could be all in, what do you call it? Will they plant the people there to do it? This could be Trump's people there. This could be an optics for him, for Trump to plant those people there with the flag, so he can say, hey, look, this looks like military, it looks like war. So we're going to bring the military in. And when you bring the Marines in, Marines are trained to kill. They're not trained to play around. Yeah, I mean, and I wish that, like take that serious. Marines, when he called the Marines in, he's not calling the Marines in to joke around with these folks, and especially them being brown folks. We can take the American, how it looks for America out of it. These are brown folks with a non-American flag, declaring war, throwing bottles, doing whatever, trying to cape for un-American people. So in Donald Trump's defense, he's acting like he, in my opinion, that's what I think like he should do. But I do agree that it's his optics for him. This is all political move for him. Like Kevin said, he gets to sticking to Gavin Newsom. He didn't even ask Gavin Newsom what he needed to do. He saw a spark and he turned it into a flame. Politically and strategy-wise, I see what they're doing. They're creating the problem so they can look like the good guy to come in and fill it. But if you start stoking on Americans' heartstrings and you see Mexican flags running around fighting against Homeland Security, you don't see American flags. Optics, media, what they're putting out there. It's par for the course of what Trump would do. I'm not surprised what Trump's doing. So, I think that it's justified. Was Trump's actions justified for the optics of what they're doing and how they're playing this out? Yes, I do believe that they were.
Strangely, just to follow up on something Tarris said, strangely, one of the things that I somewhat agree with, that, again, one of the things that really gets folks on the side sort of charged up are these people out here who are holding up Mexican flags. And I agree, that's not a good look. If the whole idea is to send across the message that, hey, these are American citizens, or people who should be American citizens and deserve to stay here, probably not the best from an optics standpoint. But I would also say those same people who have a problem with folks hoisting the Mexican flag have no problem with people who in the southern United States love to walk around with a Confederate flag, which are actual traitors of a country and who did declare war on the United States. But we think it's totally for people to walk around with Confederate flags and hang them outside of their houses and take them to the Capitol, and in some places have them over the state Capitol buildings. But then they want to have an issue with people having the Mexican flag. I just wanted to point out that little bit of hypocrisy there.
And I gotta say, to rebuttal with that, I said I'm gonna keep this thing, because I could have said the Confederate flag being around in the Capitol is a trigger, and I believe that they're using those same optics, the same thing, exact same thing, that same thing that they did with the Confederate flag in the Capitol. They're doing the same thing. It's the exact same thing. I don't see any difference in it. So that's why I was saying I'm keeping this to this particular subject.
No, same people raise the Mexican flag. Just remember that the next time you see somebody hoist a Confederate flag or one of those nice little Trump, make America great flags in place of the United States flag.
Hey, Kevin, you're going in and out. You're coming in and out with your audio. So I'm not sure if there's anything you can do about it, but Phil, go right ahead. I'll go after you.
This whole deportation thing, of course, was sold as, oh, we're going to get the criminals out. That's how it was sold. And I think all of us knew that was pure BS. We all knew that they were going to come after people who had established lives here, who had led lives that were hard work, people who are hardworking and never committed a crime. Just much like this story we'll talk about here in Cincinnati of this guy, a student who came here when he was 8 years old. So whether they have a right to or not, it to me is unbelievably distasteful to grab people who have been law-abiding citizens and have been here for years and send them to a country. Many of them haven't been here for 20 years. So I just think it's just plain cruel. Secondly, the response that Trump has made is totally, in my view, unnecessary. From what I can tell, there has been violence, but the LA, it isn't like the LA police was unable to contain it. And when Trump says they're insurrectionists, I mean, that's a joke. He freed 1,500 real insurrectionists. So for him to say that is just totally ridiculous. However, I still believe those things do not justify violence, any kind of violence. And I know you guys don't like it when I pull up quotes from Martin Luther King and all this, but if you look at the civil rights movement in the 60s and all, he had an intentional strategy of nonviolence, and it wasn't just to be nice people. He knew that if scenes of cops beating nonviolent protesters and children too in Birmingham, if there were pictures going out over the whole country of law-abiding protesters being attacked by the police, it would provide great support for what he was trying to do. And I think the same principle applies here, however limited the violence was. When you engage in burning cars or whatever the heck they've been doing, you lose the support of many American people, because they see that and they're disgusted by it. If they had avoided that and simply protested, I think the country would have looked much more favorably on them.
Yeah, well, MLK once said that a riot is the language of the unheard. So
Yeah, but he didn't endorse it.
but he explained it. So what you're seeing here, if you believe that it got violent, because to me, violence is like against another person. Damaging property is something different, and I don't condone either, but also don't.
Yeah, unless it's your car
Well,
or
if
your
it's my
store.
car, my store, obviously it's going to hit me. It's going to impact me a lot differently, for sure. But even saying that, I feel the same way, even if my property is a consequence of it. I mean, the people are rising up, and this is just the beginning. Trump is terrible.
Yeah, you start justifying that, and then where does
Start
it end?
justifying what?
Does it
Protesting?
end if they start?
That's all they were
shooting?
doing was
I'm
protesting.
interested to hear Nathan finish.
You're justifying
But
violent
I haven't seen
That's
any
what I'm
violence
talking about.
protesting. To me, violence is
Well, with all due respect, I think
no,
I
that's
call burning
no, that's
cars
not violence,
You
Phil.
don't?
That's
Okay.
property damage.
Okay.
That's property damage.
Okay.
Violence
All right.
is a human versus another human.
Okay, but when we talked about the riots, I'm sorry, when we talked about the uprising here, you and Kevin said there were people that were
Yeah, by the
beaten up
police.
in that. And I didn't hear you differentiate between that kind of
Well,
violence and
I
property
don't
damage.
differentiate it. You want to take it back to the Cincinnati protests, because those were not riots; those were protests. No, they were not.
They were
Those were
riots, but you
protests.
call
I
them
mean, you're entitled
uprising,
to your
whatever you
opinion.
want. Yeah,
Yeah, they were violent, and the
protests.
violence was the Cincinnati Police Department that was shooting civilians with rubber bullets and tear gas. Phil, I was down.
Yeah,
I was
Same thing
downtown.
in Birmingham. The police were violent, but the demonstrators in Birmingham and all those other cities had a specific strategy not to
But now you want to
respond
get
with
away from the
violence.
point.
And that's probably what led to the support for the Civil Rights Act and other
Yeah,
kind
but
of
now
hey,
you
Nathan,
away
just
from the
Nathan,
point.
just for the record and for the facts, there were a couple of instances where I think there was a case where there was a truck driver or somebody who was pulled out of his car and who was assaulted. I think there were a couple of other cases where people were assaulted by protesters and things during the civil unrest in Cincinnati. So technically, there were violent instances. I'm not saying it was widespread, but I do remember that there were a few cases where
It's
those types
always
of
a few
instances were
cases. It's
reported.
always a few
Yeah.
cases, but the violence I remember was the tear gas, the rubber bullets that the Cincinnati Police Department and law enforcement was shooting indiscriminately into the crowd. So, but bringing it back to what's happening.
Oh, sure. They should have just let them burn down the city and break in the stores.
No, I'm not
That's what you're
saying that.
saying?
No. But to take it back to what happened in
Sounds like you
California, no,
are.
I just told you I'm not saying that. But to bring it back to what we're talking about in California, I haven't seen violence. I've seen property damage, and it's not a good thing.
Right. Well, that's a distinction I respectfully don't
Duly
agree
noted.
with.
But to my eye, what I've seen is property damage, and as I'll say, I mean, this is America. People feel like their rights are being compromised.
There's a constitutional right to
None
damage
that I've
somebody's
ever read
property?
before. I mean, you're a lawyer. Have you read that?
Yeah.
I've never read that as a president.
No, there is no such right.
Right.
There's a right to protest, but there is no right to
Yeah,
commit
I
acts
agree
of
with you.
violence.
And as I've said, I haven't seen any acts of violence. I've seen damage of property.
I'm sorry, or damage of
Yeah,
property.
like I
You
said,
have
I
no
don't
right to do
I don't
that either.
condone either, but I understand it. I understand it when the people are not heard, when they feel oppressed. This is what they're going to do. This country was founded on that same principle. That's how we all got here, right? Is because early Americans, right? Not the Native Americans, but European settlers that came and stole it all. They were running away from the oppression from Europe, right? It's the same basic concept. So, it's just so hypocritical for the same people that totally excuse the violence that we saw that was committed by the mob against police officers that is well documented on January 6th. That was nothing. But I'm supposed to be upset because somebody's holding a Mexican flag. I don't care. I don't
I
care about
agree
the
with that
Mexican
point.
flag. This
I
is
agree
a
with that point.
non-issue. This person might be a plant by the Republicans for all
Yes, there
I know.
it
I don't
is.
care.
There it is, Nate.
Well, it doesn't matter. You have a
You
right
got a
to
right to
hold up a flag.
I
That's
don't care if
part
he
of
was
free
holding up the
speech.
Burger King flag, the McDonald's flag. So what? The real
it is.
issue is that Donald Trump wants to be a dictator. He has weaponized the federal government, and this is just the beginning. It is just the beginning. And shame on anybody who voted for him because you got blood on your hands. You voted for this. We knew this was going to happen, and we didn't want to see this happen to our country because we love our country. It just goes back to what I said. People who stand by Donald Trump, MAGA, they may call themselves America First, but they don't really care about this country. They really want to destroy the country, right? That's the reality of it. MAGA and people that support Donald Trump, they like what Trump is doing. I'm watching Fox News last night, and they're like, hey, this is what you voted for. Hey, this is what you wanted. Hey, stay tight. So that's what it is. This is what they want. They want Donald Trump to destroy the country. They want Donald Trump to destroy the federal government. In their crazy heads, they're going to create something new that's going to be even better. They think for them, although it's not really going to go out that way. It's going to be bad for all of us. But this is just the beginning. You are living in the beginning of this is fascinating, actually. I was just telling my wife the other day, like, I was trained as a political scientist. So there's a part of me that when I detach from the emotions, this is fascinating to see what's happening in a bad way. It's fascinating. Like when I was in college,
Steve,
hold on real quick,
Schmidt,
I'll get off the stage. When I was in college, we were trained and used to study these type of political phenomenon. To be able to see this in real time, the political scientist part of my brain is fascinated. The father is terrified because we are watching something new happen in this country. And if people think, the midterms and we can just turn this around, you haven't been paying attention to what MAGA has really been building. But go ahead, Phil.
Well, I'm kind of scared to be in agreement with you, Nathan, but I'll plunge ahead. Steve Schmidt, who has a really good podcast, he says that when fascism comes, it will be wrapped in the flag and wearing a cross, which is, I think, very typical of the kind of MAGA folks. there was an interesting news segment on about this waitress. It was an area that the whole town voted for Trump. I forget, Texas or somewhere. And they came, and there was this waitress that all these people just loved, who'd been there for years and years. And they took her and arrested her because she was, illegal. And like all these people who voted for Trump were protesting, they're angry and this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, you only have yourself to blame. You are in no position to object to this woman who happens to be a friend of yours being taken.
The only people who are upset about what Donald Trump is doing are Democrats. I don't know one Republican who I've talked to or in my circles who are like, man, we don't like what Donald Trump just sent the military in. We don't like the fact that Donald Trump just sent the National Guard. We are all happy that he did it. We're happy that he sent the National Guard in there to get this stuff in line. I mean, it's not.
It was already in line.
That's what. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to the insurrections that happened for George Floyd. There was rumors that
there was no insurrections that happened for George Floyd. There were protests.
Protests. Let's say protests, riots, insurrection, whatever. What was going on? There was rumors that ActBlue and George Soros and his people were taking bricks and throwing them through windows just to get people incited after the peaceful people went home. And when people would go home, and then they would start throwing stuff into the windows and getting people after dark.
Let me
Those
guess.
same things.
Well, Tarris, let me ask you this: I'm a Republican, but were these Republicans you're talking about? Were they happy about what happened?
Okay, back to what I was saying. They would take bricks and they throw them through the window. You're getting me off. You're trying to get me off track again. They take bricks, and they throw them through the windows. So the Republicans use the same tactics. Now the Republicans are using the same. It's not called quick. Remember when they did with the Black Panther Party? Whenever they put people inside the Black Party to infiltrate the Black Panther Party, I believe that down there in California they started a spark, they lit a match, and Donald Trump poured gasoline on it. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying.
Right.
So
and they're happy.
And the people, including myself, when the National Guard went in there, I was like, yes, because it hadn't been done since 1965. Since the Civil Rights Movement, I'm happy.
No, you're incorrect. It had been done, but with the permission.
It hasn't been done without the permission of the governor since 1965, since the Civil Rights Movement. And Donald Trump doing that sent a clear message to his base and the people who voted for him, who are happy that he did it. This is like you all are saying. I agree with everything you guys are saying. You guys are the only ones that aren't who don't like it. I like it. When I saw he sent the National Guard in there, I was like, yes.
Tarris,
when he sent the military in there and the Marines in there, I was like, yes. I know what my son went through when he went through the Marines training. So when he sent the Marines in there, he's not playing. Y'all, the Democrats, y'all play around. Y'all joke around. Y'all all that stuff. He's not joking. They keep it up. He's going. And if it was brown people, just like it was brown people who were doing the insurrection, what would have happened? There would have been brown bodies all over Washington, D.C. that day, January 6th. If it was black people or brown people storming the Capitol, they're waiting for the chance, in my opinion, to spray on them people. And I don't like it, but that's just what's going on. Like Nate just said, we're going through a time that is going to be studied for time to come. They're waiting. They got rubber bullets now, but all they're waiting for, they're trained to kill, man. They're not joking.
Why are you happy about that? So why are you happy about that? Tarris, you've already admitted that there was no justification, no real issue for Donald Trump to bring the troops in. You've already admitted that. You've already admitted that he was pouring gasoline on it for political purposes. None of this is good, but you're happy about it. Why?
I'm okay with it because the same thing was done to us during the George Floyd and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I say this on this program all the time. It ain't no fun with the rabbit got the gun. When the Democrats took the George Floyd situation and the civil rights and during the pandemic and all that and poured gasoline on those situations when the peaceful protesters were just going home at night. And then they would take and they would go at night and time. They would go back.
You have no evidence of that.
You guys don't have any evidence of what you guys are saying with Trump. And I'm agreeing with you.
First of all, we cannot have legitimate, intelligent conversation on this podcast if we're going to traffic in conspiracy theories and things that
Okay.
are not based in fact. So,
Okay.
Tarris, you have no evidence, no proof of, the George Soros anti-Semitic trope,
Act Blue's not real.
conspiratorial tropes that the Republicans have been using for years is all garbage. Just like they want to try to throw it off and say Antifa was behind the January 6th, all of that is crap that people put out there. So if we're gonna have intelligent conversations on this program, please let's not traffic in conspiratorial tripe that's not based in any kind of facts. And basically 90% of what you just said there, Terrence, was exactly that sort of thing.
And you've
Here's
been
one
telling me
thing
the
I
same
will.
thing for this entire time I'm going to
Yeah,
programming, but it always comes out being true at the end. You say
it
that I'm
doesn't,
not speaking
Terrence.
facts, but
It
it
doesn't,
always
Terrence.
comes out being true.
Terrence, it
No.
doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. And that's part of the mania that goes on in MAGA is you guys traffic in conspiracy theories versus facts, and you believe that crap. And I'm like, look, I'm open to anything. I'm open to having any conversation if you've got evidence and facts. But what I refuse to do is engage in conversations where you have zero evidence, like a stolen election and all of these other things that people traffic in. Produce evidence. And in every situation where you've been given an opportunity to produce evidence, you haven't. You haven't been able to come up with any concrete facts. It's always conjecture. So that's not the area where I live in and where I like to have debate. If you do, that's fine. But that's not something that I'm going to be a part of here on this podcast. So
You don't have to,
so
Kevin.
let's stick with the facts and
The
debate
facts is
those.
right now, Donald Trump called in the National Guard. Donald Trump called in the Marines. That's serious. Y'all want to stick to facts and not take it back to anything else? Let's stick to facts. Donald Trump called in the National Guard and he called in the Marines. What's the next move on California then? And I'll shut up and I'll let y'all go. I'll let you guys and talk in Democrat running around talking points. And every time I bring a different viewpoint, you guys just try to say I'm crazy. And every
Terrence,
time I'm always.
I don't have a. I don't
You
have
said
a problem
you
with
said
you. I
it's
don't have a problem
unintelligent for
with
me
you.
to. And you
I
said
don't.
it was
No, 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 no.
unintelligent conversation.
I don't have a problem with you bringing a different viewpoint. What I do have a problem with you bringing is alternative facts, and that's not. And that doesn't help the conversation. Now, here I want
Okay.
to address a couple of things that you said that I do agree with. I agree with Terrace, and something that Phil said also is that those who support Donald Trump don't have a problem with anything that Donald Trump is doing right now in California. And I think to Phil's point, the property damage or however you want to categorize it, only lends into those folks who don't have a problem with what Donald Trump is doing. Now you could say that riots or whatever, however you want to categorize this, are the cries of the unheard. That's true. And I'm not saying that I don't understand that. But you got to understand that type of escalation also comes with other types of escalation. And so all of the property damage and things that was done in these protests only opened the door for Donald Trump to now do what he is doing. Anytime these protests go from peaceful to any type of property damage or violence, I agree with Phil. You lose the moral high ground more broadly in the
No, you don't.
conversation. Nathan, I know you don't
No,
agree
you
with
don't.
this, but I will stand. I even said this
No,
during
you
the
don't.
I even said this during the George Floyd protests that prior to the destruction that went on in some of these cities, the entire country was on the side of George Floyd and that pursuit.
including the most police
Absolutely. It was
officers.
such an egregious thing that people couldn't deny it. And so everybody was behind it. But the minute those protests went from being peaceful to property damage and those sorts of things, the folks who really didn't want to address the issue in the first place were able to change the narrative. And they did it. They did it. They changed the narrative. And that is exactly what you cannot like it, Nathan, but I'm
That's what I'm
telling you,
saying,
that's
Kevin. I
exactly
just said
that's
that.
exactly what happened. You can shake your head,
No,
bro. You
that's not what
cannot like
happened.
it. It's absolutely
That's
what
not what
happened.
happened, Kevin. What
Okay,
hap
okay.
what
That's exactly what I
listen,
just said, by the
when
way.
if you in your heart and in your experience were thought that what happened to George Floyd was wrong and you place that in the larger context of the historical clashes between law enforcement and black people, because a few people broke some bottles or firebombed the store, is not going to change your opinion about that. The only
Nathan, it's not.
people,
I'm not
the
talking about.
only
I'm talking
people.
about the
Let me finish
narrative.
the
I'm
thought,
talking
Kevin.
about the narrative. I'm
The
talking about the
narrative never
narrative.
changed. Because the narrative is, it all
Okay.
depends on whose mind you're talking about. So for
Well,
people who
I
were
tell
never
you what,
really,
we didn't get as much out of that. We did not get as much out of that George Floyd situation as you could have
and
gotten.
we never was going to. And we
I
never was
disagree with
going
that.
to,
I
because
disagree with
America
that
at its core
wholeheartedly.
is racist. And
I
what
disagree with that wholeheartedly.
and when people don't want to support you, it's just like on a job. When people want to get you off a job, what happens? Any little mistake you make, they magnify it. That's we got to do job action. It's the same thing with George Floyd. The people who jumped off and changed the narrative was never on board from the beginning. They were looking
I
for
agree
any
with
little
that.
excuse.
I agree with that, Nathan. I agree. That's exactly what I just said. And those protests, when they turned to property damage, gave those people that exact opportunity to change the narrative,
No,
and
they
they
never,
did it.
they
They
were
did
never
it.
on board.
And
They
that's
were
what
never
happened.
Right,
on board.
Nathan, understand what I'm saying. They were never on board, but there was nothing that they could say early on because the situation was so egregious. There's a difference between me saying, "Hey, I don't agree with this, but I don't really have a wedge of a way to get in there to make my point. So I just got to fall back and be quiet about it." They were quiet early on because there was nothing to say. But when the protest turned violent, they knew they couldn't say anything about what happened to George Floyd, so they used that narrative, bro.
Yeah,
I'm
they did.
telling you.
They
I'm
Can I,
did.
telling
can
you.
I jump
They
in here one
did
more time? Can I
because
jump in here one more time and say this about about what we were talking about? That's exactly what I was saying that the Republicans are doing with this situation. Exactly what Kevin just said, that they took the situation when it turned nonviolent and it was able for them to control the narrative. That's exactly what they learned from that and were like, they took this and took it and ran with it. So now they're like, oh, they've been biting at the chip for an opportunity to do it. And then with being in California and being against Gavin Newsom and having all these things and have the 29 Palms, arms throw away from LA, they're talking about, oh, he called in the troops. They're right down the road. The Marine base is right down the road. It's not like they had to call them in from somewhere. They called them in from about an hour away. Come on, it's optics. That's all I was saying. So when I bring those things up and I try to bring it around, and it's not met with like we say the exact same thing. And my question I got to ask with A Classy once said, why do black people even care what's going on in California right now?
Huh?
Because
Huh?
if it was the same thing,
What?
I'm
Because
trying to ask
they're
a question.
Americans.
They're Americans, but they only got American flags. And would they
California
be
is
there for us?
the
That's
last
a
time I
question.
checked.
Would they be there for us?
The-
Would they be there for us?
What are you talking about? Who would be there for? What are you talking about?
The immigrant Americans who are being deported out of here, would they be there for black people? Like we're caping for them. Why?
Some
Why
would,
are we doing this?
some would, some may not, but that ain't even the real question. That's nothing. That's what you call a way of trying to like muddy the waters and distract people from the real issue. Who cares? That ain't the real issue. The real issue is unchecked federal power. See, Congress is not doing their job. I don't know about you, but I don't want to live under a royalty or a dictatorship. So yeah, anything that happens in this country to any person in this country affects everybody in this country. We're all connected. So don't try to disconnect us like, I don't know why black people, we should care more than anybody else, because when they get done with the immigrants and the illegals and the brown people, black people are next. And history has told us that over and over again. So that's why black people should care, because a lot of black people and relatives live in California. That's why.
Most of them I know in
Real
California they're standing down. Most people I know in California said this.
That's a whole separate issue. That's a whole separate issue. The real issue is Trump is trying to do things that a president should not do. I got a video clip I want to play for you. And tell me your thoughts about it after it's real quick. It's like 30 seconds. But this is Donald Trump many years ago talking about, well, check this out. You can check it out for yourself.
I promised 4 years ago at the Republican convention, I'm going to restore law and order.
And I have, except in Democrat-run cities. Look, we have laws. We have to go by the laws. We can't move in the National Guard. I can call insurrection, but there's no reason to ever do that, even in a Portland case. We can't call in the National Guard unless we're requested by.
They weren't requested by the governor, Terrace.
I
So
get
there's
it.
a lot of issues that we need to deal with. Like when the president or any elected official does something that crosses the line, it's called checks and balances. We should be concerned about that. So
Well,
that was Trump 4 years ago saying, like, look, I can't bring in the National Guard unless the governor asks me to. Governor Newsom never asked him to.
and
He
that's
never
why
asked him
Newsom
to.
is,
He never
and that's why
requested it.
Newsom, yeah, and that's why Newsom is thinking about bringing a lawsuit
They already have.
as it pertains to this situation and calling in the National Guard. Look, Donald Trump has been testing the waters for the last few months about how far he can push or even break laws. He'll just do things and then let you sort it out after the fact, right? Like it's like do it and then ask permission later or apologize later. So it's like Gavin Newsom sues him, but so what? The National Guard is already there. Marines are already on the ground. People are already going to be dealt with in certain the damage is going to be done by the time the courts even come in and address this situation. And this is what Donald Trump has learned. I'll do what I want to do, then let the court come in now, and if they want to try to stop me and say it was wrong after the fact, fine. But what you gonna do? What you
By
gonna
that time,
do?
it gives him a chance to change his narrative again.
Because here's the thing: you've done everything that you possibly can to Donald Trump, and he's still standing. You've impeached him twice. He's still here. You tried to shoot at him. He's still here. This dude, you 34 felony convictions. He's beaten those. This is this guy's mentality is he feels like he's untouchable and he's invincible and he's going to continue to push the boundaries of what you can do, and he's saying and he's just flat out saying I'm daring you to stop me, and then and this is what he's doing right now.
Kamikia writes, if this immigration/ICE situation doesn't trigger KKK and slave catcher ancestral memory, you don't have much of a connection to Black history. I agree with her 100%.
Yeah, I agree.
1000%. Why should Black people care? Nobody in this country should be paying attention more to what's happening than Black people. Because we already know what happens next. We've seen this over and over and over and over again. But circling back, I'll say it again. I hear what the point you're making, but I stand by what I said. All this narrative changing because somebody flips a car or firebombs a store, it was going to happen anyway. Those people are going to change the narrative and jump off of the ship of support for what was happening with George Floyd, no matter what. It didn't matter what happened. They were going to jump off.
Well, let me share something. I have a friend I've known for years. This guy's a big Trump guy. He listens to all the right wing media and this. He's a former cop, though. And when that thing happened with George Floyd, he was totally adamant at how terrible it was, that cop had no right to do that, didn't follow procedures, blah, blah, blah. That's how he wasn't just blowing smoke, because I know this guy. He was totally serious. But then when the what you call them, rioting, violence, whatever you want to call them, that
he was already on
the other side.
He never left the other side. Because just think about this logically.
Well, I tell you this. An awful lot of cops were quoted after that. Who a lot of police chiefs who spoke up, and were very, very harsh.
Here's the truth of what Nathan is saying, is that people feel and think a certain kind of way. Here's where I think he and I are both correct. People think and feel a certain kind of way, but sometimes there are things that happen that are undeniable. But people look for off ramps to not have to accept the undeniability of what they just saw. George Floyd is an example. January 6th is an example. If you remember, and I always encourage people, remember how you felt when you were watching on your TV what happened during January 6th. Everybody was mortified, horrified. Remember what people were saying in the hours and the days afterwards. But this is where the narrative change matters. Because if you're one of those people who don't want to accept the ugly reality of what you just saw, you look for an off ramp. And in the years post January 6th, there have been people who have massaged, who have changed, who have outright lied about that narrative, and people who were horrified and who knew what happened on January 6th was wrong are now okay with Donald Trump pardoning those people. It's because they were never truly on board. They didn't want to accept. They didn't want to accept what happened on January 5th, but they or 6th, but they couldn't because it was right there in front of their eyes. So they were looking for an off ramp to be able to get them back to where they originally were. The George Floyd protests were the same thing. So I'm not disagreeing with you, Nate, but I'm trying to get you to understand that he who controls the narrative or who can set the narrative controls the conversation.
Yeah, but the
And
media sets the narrative.
And what
The
not
media sets the
anymore.
narrative.
Now,
Because what happened
well,
is when the protests, the media is what delivers the news to the people. So when the
not
property
anymore.
damage,
No more.
yes, it
Not
is.
anymore.
It
Not
is. It's the media,
anymore.
whether it's social
Not
media or mainstream media. It's the media.
well, yes,
But
yes.
but
So when
mainstream
you say
media,
yes,
is a driver of social media. We don't like to look at it like
no,
that. Yes, it is.
no, it's
It
not.
absolutely is.
Nathan, here, let me absolutely dispel you of that notion. And these are things that we talk about in the industry nowadays. It used to be that the media, mainstream media, set the tone, but now with social media in place, everybody has their own platform. Like these celebrities, the president, that's why he goes to True Social. He doesn't need if he didn't want to have a White House press conference, another one again, he wouldn't need to. He could go ahead and release
Kevin,
everything that he wanted to through his private account. That's the way a lot of these people, and I'm telling
but
you
that's not
this
my point,
because
though.
as someone who works in it, okay, it used to be that used to be the case, but it's
It's
no
still the
longer
case.
the case. In fact, mainstream media finds itself chasing after social media more often than not, and that's the
No,
truth.
no, that's not true. And
Okay,
I'm
okay.
somebody who does digital media. So what I'm telling you is if you go to the biggest YouTube channels that do political commentary right now, 9 times, as if 9.9% of the time, they are referencing or talking about mainstream media articles. So
And they're
everything you
giving
said
Yeah.
is true.
So
But
let me
but
tell you.
but mainstream
So the
media
origin.
remains a driver for social media, especially political digital media, because
So
that's how
here,
they get the
let me
articles.
explain. Let me explain what I mean. Is that mainstream media may have a larger reach, okay,
They
millions
have more
more audience
resources.
members,
They have more resources.
but the way news has always been gathered and the way that it always begins is with news tips and things of that nature that originate outside of a newsroom. So a story that I may wind up writing for the Inquirer doesn't originate in my own head and sometimes even in my own digging and reporting. Sometimes it does, but most often I'm following up on a news tip or something that I've seen or something that somebody has presented to me that leads me to write the larger story. So this is where I'm saying
Yeah,
that
all that's true.
a lot of things that you wind up seeing on your in the Inquirer on your daily newscast might originate with a Facebook post or something that people see
That's
on
happening more and more.
Instagram or a video that's reported. It's happening a lot more than you
That's happening more
realize.
and more. But if you go right now and look at the biggest YouTube political channels, Democrat, Independent, or Republican, if you watch those videos, they are 9.99% of the time commenting or referencing mainstream articles. What happened on ABC, what CNN reported, what Fox News reported, and then putting their own spin on it. That's the game right now. And so everything you're saying is true, but but many of these social media these YouTube channels could not exist if mainstream media wasn't presenting these articles that they could put a spin on. And that's just the way the game works on some level. So yeah, that's becoming more and more and more. Like more and more and more mainstream's going to Facebook and all that kind of stuff, like everybody else. But as a digital person, I can't compete with the AP. I can't compete in terms of what's happening in the White House. So I have to rely on them. And that's what I mean by that.
But after
Yeah,
they've
and
damaged the integrity of the AP and all these other places like Stephen Miller, like can you see these people getting suspended after they
AP's
go up?
integrity is you think AP's integrity is in question? In what way? Because they won't say it's the Gulf of America?
Because Trump has created a narrative to get people suspended if they don't agree with them. Look at the last guy who the guy with the knuckles he got that guy suspended because he kicked back about the knuckle things about the immigrant guy. So Trump is using the DOJ, the media, every outlet that he possibly can and could use for his regime. And that's
Trump
what
is weaponizing the government.
Yes.
And you think that's a good thing?
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying
it's good or bad. Is it good or bad, Tarris?
It was bad when Biden was doing it.
Is it good or bad?
It's bad when Biden's doing it. It's bad when Trump's doing it.
I didn't ask you about Biden. Is it good or bad?
So sometimes it's good and sometimes it's
bad. It good or bad that Trump is weaponizing the government to influence the media? You just said it. And this goes back to what I said. MAGA doesn't really care about America. You don't give a damn about this country. All you care about is Trump.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
You're proving it. You're proving it right now.
When Joe Biden is creating a narrative in a
Joe
certain
Biden,
way,
president, sir.
When the Democrats are creating a narrative in a certain way, when they're in power and they're allowed to do that, and they can got the Department of Justice, they got the media. When Trump, I don't agree with it, but he's doing what they do when they get in power. He's doing what they do when they get in power. I'm not saying I agree with it or I disagree with it. I'm saying this is what they do when they get in power. Trump did it. Biden did it. Obama did it. When they get in power, they use whatever they can.
That you have never seen. There is no evidence, or maybe you do have some evidence. I won't assume what you have or don't have, but I've seen no evidence that Obama or Biden tried to use the DOJ or the FBI to put influence on news organizations the way I see with Donald Trump.
Okay, you didn't hear any of these hearings whenever Meta had to go to Congress
or the legal profession. I might add the legal profession.
I never did that. Obama never did that.
Come on. When they had the congressional hearings with Meta and Zuckerberg had to go through all those congressional hearings because he was being influenced by the Democratic Party and not being suppressing information. Come on, Nathan, let's not do this. You kind of put me in a corner, and I know we're saying the same thing. I'm saying when Biden does it and Trump does it, we're all doing. They're doing the same thing.
They're not doing the same thing. Calling Meta up for a congressional hearing is very different than saying, I'm going to pull your funding, or I'm going to pull your government contracts if you don't do what I say. Obama and Biden never. That's not subjective.
Yes,
as you say,
ask Mark Zuckerberg. Ask Mark Zuckerberg if he liked going to congressional hearings, being pulled away from his family, having to pull away from money that he has to be said, and go to sit in these hours-long congressional hearings, being grilled and telling the truth about Joe Biden, telling him what he can and what he could not put out on social media. To answer the question is he said, give me evidence of one person who Joe Biden has weaponized his position to use the media. Mark Zuckerberg.
But that's not true. You're not presenting the facts accurately, Tarris. You're not presenting the facts. You're not presenting the facts accurately. You're not.
But the results at the end are the truth.
That's not our fault. That's your fault.
But the results of the end are true. The question that was asked to me was, what evidence do I have? Did the Democratic Party or Joe Biden use the media to weaponize his authority to weaponize the media? Meta, the most important part, Meta, he used that. That's to answer your question.
That's not exactly what happened. So what really happened, for people who don't know, is that we were in the middle of a pandemic, and a lot of people were putting information about COVID on Facebook, and
like masks, like Dr. Fauci and using the mask, and now Dr. Fauci is going back and saying the masks were not. Come on. And Dr. Fauci got a pardon. Come on.
So a lot of people, and we know that's a good reason now because Trump would just be going crazy on it. But yeah, so what happened was we're in the middle of a pandemic. People's lives are at stake, and then people are going on Facebook spreading a whole lot of medical disinformation, a lot of information that medically, scientifically could put people's lives at risk. So Joe Biden or his administration called up Zuckerberg and said, look, can you guys fact check it? That's all he said, fact check it. That's not the same as Donald Trump saying, unless you say that it's a Gulf of America, I'm going to prevent you from having access to the Oval Office for briefings. It's a million miles away, Tarris. But I know in MAGA land, the world of false equivalencies, you guys like to just make believe that everything is the same. That is nowhere near the same. In fact, if the Trump administration did the exact same thing, I'd say, I understand. It's about public health. It's not about politics. It's about public health. Completely different, Tarris.
Another example that fits in here is Jeff Bezos, who, as you know, not only owns Amazon, but he owns the Washington Post. And during Trump's first term, Trump didn't like the stories in the Washington Post. So he told the post office to up the rates for Amazon. That was his way of getting back at Bezos. And he said he was going to send Bezos to jail. That's exactly what happened. So is it surprising that when he won the second time, the first guy to pony up $1 million for his inauguration activities was, guess who? Jeff Bezos. What else did Jeff Bezos do during the campaign? He killed an editorial in the Post endorsing Kamala Harris. Why? Because he has contracts. He's got his own space company, Blue whatever. And it was very clear that Trump was going to make sure that got yanked as well. So that is a classic example of basically using the powers of government, leveraging the power of government to force somebody to do what they want, what the politician wants you to do. And I don't believe that any president has ever done that as Trump has done.
At least not so brazenly or out in the open where it's provable. Like that's the difference between Donald Trump and any other president that you've had, maybe outside of Richard Nixon, prior to Donald Trump, is even if you want to believe that these presidents were capable of doing that sort of thing or they did it in such a way and they did it behind the scenes to the point of where you would know it. Donald Trump is out front and in your face with it. And that is the part where we as Americans need to challenge that type of stuff. And it's not okay regardless of who does it. I mean, I think the point that Nathan was making earlier, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, and this is the problem with our politics. I'm a pretty much simplistic person. Either something is right or it's not right.
Exactly.
No matter who does
No
it,
matter who it is. Exactly.
whether you my best friend or my worst enemy, if it's wrong, it's wrong. And too often in politics, things are viewed as acceptable as long as it's done by the person who's on my team, and I think they're furthering the agenda that I want. And I'll turn a blind eye to it when they do it, but when my opposite side does it, then I won't say anything. Like, it's hypocrisy for Donald Trump to talk about he believes in protecting police and law and order when you free 1,500 people, and maybe it wasn't all of them, but there were a lot of them who were involved in assaulting and injuring police officers in an attack on the Capitol. You can't say that that was an exercise in First Amendment rights. And what folks in Los Angeles is doing is not the same thing. So if you're going to condemn people in Los Angeles for property damage, you can't say what people did on January 6th was okay. Wrong is wrong, or it's not. I'm cool. I'm cool with saying, hey, I don't think people in LA should be destroying property, and I don't think what people did on January 6th was right. The people who did it, if you get them, arrest them, send them to jail. They paid a price. They broke the law. Okay, that's the choice that you can make. You can protest that way, right? You can protest that way, but you can also go to jail for protesting that way. I'm cool with that because it's breaking the law.
Well said. I agree 1,000,000,000%. I don't. If Biden had did the things that Trump is doing, I'm forming Voltron against Biden. I don't care who is in office. Right is right. Wrong is wrong. There are bigger things than just petty politics. We're talking about the overall health of our country. I got a family. I got a son. I got a daughter. I don't care about Democrat and Republican. That means nothing to me when the country and the future of our country is at stake. That's what really matters. But like Kevin said, people so caught up with MAGA and Trump, you think you're winning something? I just hope that I'm there. When they put us all in cages, I want to be next to the Black Republicans because our last days together, I am going to brutalize you verbally. When we sit in cages together.
What are they going to do to the anti-Trump? But what are they going to do to the anti-Trump?
If you're really a Republican, you rolling with us, Phil. If you are really a Republican, you got to stand on that. You got to stand on it.
You like Kevin Gordon. Yeah, you define Republican or conservative as being pro-Trump, he is neither.
A class one writes, Joe Biden failed numerous times and couldn't formulate sentences. So I guess a classy one, you've never slipped and fell ever in your life? Because I know I have. Raise your hand if you've never slipped and fell before.
They just had a video the other day of Donald Trump falling off
Donald
the
Trump
steps
slipping.
of the airplane.
Right.
Going
Going up.
upstairs, not
Absolutely.
And
downstairs.
Absolutely.
so I mean,
Classy one is reaching. Dudes like that just always crack me up. He has some kind of comment about a lame comparison. I want to know what he's talking about. What the lame
yeah,
comparison was.
I
What
do too.
January 6th to the LA riots? If you're saying that's a lame comparison, you're right. Because what happened on January 6th was a hell of a lot more severe than what's happening right out there in LA right now. So you're right. If the military and anybody should have been sent in, it should have been in on January
I
6th
agree with that.
versus what we're seeing out in LA right now. So if
But
that's the
Nancy
lane
Pelosi kept
comparison
them in
you
the
talking
garage.
about, classy one, you 100% right. I'll accept that. It was a lame comparison because I shouldn't even compare January 6th to what's going on right now.
Yeah,
So
Nancy.
I'll eat that. I'll accept that.
Well said. Nancy Pelosi didn't have any power over the placement of troops. That's been debunked many times, Tarris. But I know that MAGA, that's one of their favorite conspiracies, to use Kevin's phrase, like that's their off ramp, right? That's what allows them to completely absolve the crowd and now blame Nancy Pelosi like she was out there trying to break into the rotunda. I mean, it's just ridiculous, but it's just where we are. Let's read some more comments. Let's get the people involved. Classroom writes, Obama is called the deporter in chief. You are right. Obama deported a whole lot of people. A whole lot of people.
He deported more in 4 years than Trump
So
did
much
in
for
his
Yeah.
that
first term.
lie about Democrats uh, opening up the border. So much for that lie. But the truth is just an inconvenient thing in MAGA land.
So here, I'm glad you brought that up, Nathan, because I did want to mention that because I looked up, I was looking into this, when the case came up about the Cincinnati kid who
Yeah,
was
which is where we're
detained,
going. But go
and
ahead.
and part of my thought process was like, and again, in trying to look at things objectively and fairly and in a balanced way, I said to myself, I'm like, well, deportations aren't anything new, right? Like Donald Trump is taking a lot of fire for what he's doing with his deportations, but deportations aren't anything new. Obama did it. Joe Biden did it. Every president has had a deportation policy, and I think the biggest thing that you looked at is if you want to look at Obama, he had three different levels of priority. His number one priority for deportation were violent criminals, right? Like that was at the top of the list. Threats to national security, violent criminals. Let's round those up. Let's get them out of the country. His second priority was people who had committed maybe misdemeanor crimes, other felonies, things of that nature, drug offenses. Those were sort of like the second layer of deportations that he did. They're the second priority level. So the top two priority levels that Obama had in his deportation were people who were criminals in this country or threats to national security. The third level that he got into were those non-citizens who had final review orders for them to leave the country. So in other words, they'd appealed to being here, they'd gone through the process, and a judge had ruled, nah, sorry, I'm not accepting your reasons for being here. You got to go. That was the third layer. Anybody that sort of didn't fall into those top three priority levels under Obama didn't really mess with. So when you're talking about who is Trump going after, it seems like he says he's going after the worst of the worst, but we can look at the Cincinnati situation and we can clearly see that that's not true. That they're not just rounding up the worst of the worst, the most violent criminals, those sorts of people to get them out of the country. They're getting a kid who, by all accounts, was a model student, a great athlete, somebody who'd been in the country since I think what he was like 10 or 11 years old, something like that, 8 years
Eight
old.
years old. Eight
So
years old.
many people who would testify like, hey, this is a kid that you would want to be your neighbor, you would want to have in your neighborhood. So it's not that past presidents aren't deporting people or haven't deported people. It's sort of who they're going after. Now, one might say, I will say this, that this kid and his family, evidently they did fall into that category. What I said was that third tier category that Obama also deported, which were people who had their final review orders by a judge. Now, I think from the reporting that it said this kid and his family, they had applied Judge said no, you got to go. It just hadn't been enforced, and so now it looks like Trump is trying to enforce. So again, in fairness and in looking at it and looking at how past presidents have done it, even Obama did go after people who fell into that category.
Yeah, but this guy was a dreamer.
I
Obama
got you.
wouldn't deport
Right.
dreamers, and this guy is makes the
Yeah.
definition of a dreamer because he was
Yeah,
brought here as
I
a
got you.
child.
I got you on that, and I'm not disputing any of those facts. I was just trying to lay out some facts as I looked into this and sort of seeing how deportations are being done. And I think what Trump is doing right now is he's not just rounding up the worst of the worst, as he said. He's going after kids like this.
And on the
Yeah.
campaign trail,
Did you guys hear about the meeting that Stephen Miller had with the heads of ICE recently? Basically, he blasted them because their numbers weren't high enough, and he basically told them, "We don't just want to get the criminals out. You go out there. We want numbers. We want to meet our quota of people deported," and that is what has
Republicans.
led to this basic roundup of law-abiding
During
Not
the
you,
campaign
Phil, but
trail-
Republicans are such hypocrites. I thought quotas was a bad thing. We can't have quotas, right?
during the
Quotas
campaign
are
trail,
bad. But now all of a sudden
Well,
quotas
at
are
least I'm
American. I
consistent.
mean,
Trump
these
said-
people are completely
Well, I'm
hypocritical.
consistent though.
during the
Completely
campaign trail,
hypocritical.
Trump said that he was going to the birthers. You couldn't be like like if you were born here, you could get instant birthright, so people would come in here, anchor babies or whatever. This is just another method for him to invoke fear. If he can go and he can start doing this, like Phil said, I mean, I saw some stuff with Homegrown where he said said he was going. They're going back and forth with Newsom about arresting them, and it's like classic TV. It's like it's TV. I mean, I'm not emotionally involved in it. I just think
you emotionally involved. Look at you smiling.
emotionally involved whenever you guys when you guys are in a false narrative.
I think what you're saying
I'm
is he's
entertained by it.
entertained by
When you guys
it,
get
not
into
emotionally
your narratives
involved.
and your echo chambers, and you guys start taking your information back and forth with each other and getting on you guys sound just like the MAGA guys. Who I'm like, no, the Democrats don't think
That's
like
an
this.
That is
insult.
an
That
insult.
is a
That is
total
an insult.
insult.
I'm saying,
dare you say that?
how dare I say that whenever I'm with you guys, the same echo chamber that I hear, and I'm trying to bring reason to you guys to say, hey, there's a Republican Party out here who agrees with Trump and who agrees with this. You guys, you're crazy. Whenever I'm around Republicans, you're like, you mean there's Democrats out there that don't want to get these Mexicans out of here? You mean there's Democrats out there that don't want to take the resources for the illegal immigrants and get and reallocate that to military and other things like that? He said, you mean there's not Democrats out there that think like that? And I'm like,
Yeah.
listen to the Hot Mic podcast and you'll hear it.
But you know what the problem is, though, and I said this earlier. I'm cool, but a lot of those people that you're talking to, when I talk to some of the same people, maybe not the same ones that you're talking to, but of the same mentality, it is they're living in a world of alternative facts. Look, here's the reality: is I think if you poll most people and you ask them, hey, do you want the U.S. border to be secure? Absolutely. You're probably gonna get 85 to 90%, if not higher number agreement of that. If you ask people, hey, do you want to get violent illegals out of the country, those who are a threat to national security and who are, committing crimes and drug offenses? Absolutely, get them out of here. Where the delineation is going after people like this 19-year-old kid who are fleeing violence and who are fleeing bad situations in other countries and who come in here and who are seeking asylum and a better opportunity to get away from that. That is where the delineation. Now, there's some people who are just so cold-blooded on the other side of the aisle that would say, I don't give a damn what they're running from. We don't want them here in this country. And I personally think that is just a wrong attitude, and one that is not consistent if you want to hold yourself up as a Christian or a religious purist of some sort that doesn't hold up with that ideology or that belief, particularly when you have the capability. Look, one of the biggest lies that they tell in this country is the scarcity of resources, right? The scarcity of resources that we have. It's a lie. It's a lie that they tell to keep stuff ginned up. It's a lie that the billionaires that Nathan only wants to make $998 million that they want you to believe, because If you don't believe that, then you'll start looking at them, as
You'll
Nathan
wake
has
up.
suggested, and all of the money and resources that they have that they're hoarding. There is no scarcity of resources in this country. There is plenty of room in this country. But the powers that be who got it all don't want you to believe that. Right. And that's one of the biggest lies that they tell in this country is they want you to believe that there's not enough to go around. There's plenty to go around. They just ain't gonna share it with you because they want to build spaceships and rockets and go to the moon and make more money and do all of that garbage. Right? There's plenty to go around. It's just in the hands of a very small number of people. That's all it is. And they want to keep it.
And it also give individuals cover too, Kevin. Like there's a lot of people, and I'll talk about black people in particular. I heard a lot of black people like, yeah, get them illegals out of here. I'll say again, you can't be illegal in a stolen land, and black people should know better. But I've heard black people talking about, yeah, the border. And I'm thinking, listen, I was born in this country. I've had every advantage. Every advantage. My life is a reflection of the decisions I made, not because somebody came over the border. If I am competing as a grown man, right, with somebody that don't speak English, that's hiding out from federal authorities, that's because I didn't do my job. I didn't take what God gave me, what America gave me, and make something out of it. But instead of saying that, people want to blame brown people for taking all the jobs. Why are you competing with somebody that's here illegally that don't speak English? That's your fault. You should have graduated high school. You should have went to college. You should have went to trade school. You should have did all the things your mom and dad told you to do, and then maybe you would have been in a different position. But to blame somebody that's coming from another country because they came here and that's why I don't have a job, boy, that's your fault.
I don't think it's that though, Nathan. I don't think it's that. I think it's the Medicaid and the assistance, the federal
They don't get
government.
it. They don't get it.
The immigrants that were coming in here were getting medical. That's facts. You say I don't print that fact. That's a fact that they were getting the immigrants. They had to be taken care of by the federal government. They were overspending in New York. If you look at New York alone, what Eric Adam was saying, it was unsurmountable the amount of money that he was spending on housing the immigrants that were over here. It was crippling his economy. It was crippling New York with the crime, with the subway. It was totally. Why? You don't have to believe it, Nathan, but I'm just saying there's other alternatives or perspectives out there that you said you can't understand why black people will be like, well, get these immigrants out of here because it was straining the resources that were already strained. Then okay, if that was the case, then Joe Biden would still be president.
No. So here's some truth in what Tarris is saying, and I think we saw this to some degree when we were covering the story about the Haitians in Springfield. Like I think one of the things that was undeniable, and I think a lot of the city officials who were supportive of the Haitians being up there, they did talk about the strain that it put on the resources there locally, as far as they did, Nathan. They talked about that. And one of the conversations was is why wasn't the state doing more at its level to provide support to provide support for Springfield to help them deal with it. And I think later on DeWine kind of tried to come through and say that the state was going to do some things. So the reasons why there are not enough resources, like there are a couple of different conversations that can be going on,
Kevin,
that are all true. You could say that yes, some cities' resources are being stretched thin because of the influx of immigrants into a community. But there's a reason behind that, right? Maybe they're not getting the support that they should get or the funding that's coming in to help deal with that.
Kevin, listen, see, that's more of the lies and the games
Oh
that
my
politicians
God.
play on us. There is no scarcity of resources. The real issue is that the state of Ohio, these Republicans, didn't want to help people like Springfield. The state of Ohio got plenty of money. Plenty of money. Let me give you an example. Right now, there's a big conversation going on about $1.7 billion in unclaimed funds that state Republicans want to turn into a slush funds for sports stadiums. $1.7 billion in unclaimed funds. That money could have easily been sent to Springfield, but Republicans didn't want to do it. So we don't have a resource issue. We have a political issue. That's the real problem. And Republicans don't want to help out the way they're supposed to.
Even when you're dealing with, like you saying, a political issue, even when it comes to the state level, the city level, the local level, it's all locals waiting for the state. The state's waiting for federal. So yeah, there might be money in there, but in a fiscal year budget, you're only allowed to spend a certain amount of money unless you call your city administrators in and they elect and they say you can amend the budget. Other than that, you can't deviate from the budget. Is that correct, Phil? So
no, it's not correct.
So when they're waiting on resources and say they're having to house the immigrants that come in, they have to use that money and then they have to go back and wait for federal to get more money and more money. So it strains.
No, there was no strain. The state of Ohio has $1.7 billion sitting in a fund, and these are funds that are unclaimed. And Ohio Republicans want to use it to build stadiums. Instead of, they could have sent that money to Springfield. So we do not have a lack of resources. We have a lack of will, and we have one party that wants to starve the people. That's Republicans. They could have easily took that money.
And so that gets into the politics. Nathan, which gets to kind of Tarris's larger point, which is if you don't think that taxpayer money should be spent on immigrants, particularly those who aren't who are undocumented, in the country. If you feel like that's the politics of the argument, is part of the reason why the state of Ohio didn't send that money is because you got a Republican controlled General Assembly with a constituency that doesn't think that that's how their tax dollars should be spent.
But it's not a lack of resources.
That's part of the.
You're right about that. But it's not about a lack of resources. We got plenty of money in Ohio. They could have sent that down over to Springfield. They chose not to because of politics. So it goes back to the point you make, and I think it's a very eloquent point. The powers that be got working class people out here at each other's throats as if we don't have enough, and we've got plenty. So that is not true. I would much rather my tax dollars go to help people than go to fund some multi-billion-dollar stadiums for people that are in the top 1% of wage earners. That's crazy. But that's what Republicans do. Democrats wouldn't do that. Democrats would spend the money on the people the way it should be, because that's where the tax money came from. It came for the people. The other thing that needs to be said about people who are non-American citizens who are here is that we tend to speak about them as that they're in a broad brush, and it's not. You have some people who are here and are not interacting with the court systems or ICE or immigration services at all. Those people are on the run. The vast majority of people are somewhere within that process, right? Just like this young man from the Cincinnati area. And here's a picture of his teammates saying free Emerson. And I was staying with them any day. And what these young people need to do is go home and check their parents and ask their mother and father who you voted for. You start right there. Like, Mom, you did this to Emerson.
Yeah. Hey, and
you did this to
him. You're right.
That's where they need to start. So I'm with them 1,000%. This young man, as Kevin was saying, he's been in this country for a long time, and he's meeting with immigration services on a regular basis.
Can I say something about billionaires? I think as much as we can point to people like the old so-called oligarchs that have basically caved into Trump and are just out for their own enrichment, there are some very wealthy people that have done some really pretty great things and unselfish things. You may know about this, but Warren Buffett started this thing where he's tried to convince as many of these rich people as possible to basically give their money to very worthwhile causes, like curing AIDS and things like that. And he and Bill Gates, these others, basically have willed the vast majority of their wealth for those kind of things. And Warren Buffett, you might remember, also, who, by the way, lives in the same kind of small house in Omaha he's lived in his whole life. So he, unlike others who want posh airplanes and stuff, and he's just not that kind of person. He also had spoken up, I think, when Obama was president, about saying that he said, you need to tax me more. I pay less in taxes than my secretary. And so I just think we need to acknowledge that all of those guys are not like Musk and
Oh,
Bezos and
absolutely. I'm
some of
glad
these
you made that
others.
point. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. But back to Emerson, just real quick, then we'll move on to this story down in OTR, which is just it just pulls at your heart. I hate to see this happen to anybody's family, but this Emerson guy, this young man, was meeting with immigration services on a regular basis. He wasn't running from the law. He was
He
following
was
the rules.
following the rules,
But
and he
because
gets
Trump has
punished.
a quota, and because people like Tarris and MAGA love a TV show, instead of just sending a man a letter and saying, hey, we want you guys to leave, they want to turn it into a big TV spectacle. And I think it's wrong to use human beings like that as pawns in some Trump TV show. I think it's dead wrong. And I hope this young man and all the people like him can find their way back to the country. I mean, for what I read, that's the kind of person I want here. I want somebody like Emerson. Seems like a good young man. He's in the sports, academics, just graduated. He's got the rest of his life. That's the kind of person, as an American citizen, I want you here. I would trade him for some of these white supremacists, some of these good old boys rolling around trying to get ready for the Armageddon any day of the week. That's the real threat to every one of us. It ain't Emerson. It's not brown people coming from Mexico that just want to work here. It's the white supremacists that don't believe that democracy is the right way to go anymore. That is the real threat. That's the real threat. But let's move on. Let's talk about what happened. This is a very tragic story. Patrick Herringer was fatally stabbed in the neck in his McMicken Avenue home back on June 4th. Very tragic. I mean, this guy owned a business here. Apparently, he had 2 tours in the military. By all accounts, hey, I say the guy was a hero. You did 2 tours for this country. You are a hero. And apparently somebody broke into their home and assaulted this man and stabbed him to death. His wife put out a video. I'm not going to play it. But essentially, she's blaming the city of Cincinnati. She says that the city hasn't done enough when it comes to crime. And she said that when the police got there, they basically put her in handcuffs. And I know she feels some kind of way about it. And I think that anybody who has, recently lost someone, we need to give them as much space as possible so they can grieve and get out what they need to say. But I just want to know, I mean, what do you think about what she had to say? She's blaming the city. She said the city isn't doing enough. They're basically talking a good game, but they're not putting enough police patrols in OTR and perhaps other parts of the city of Cincinnati. Is the city to blame for her husband's death in any way, in your opinion?
In my opinion, yes. I've always, and this is what I kind of focused on a lot when I was on city council, is putting cops on the beat. I mean, it is a deterrent, and especially when they get out of the cars and they walk around, it creates a deterrent. And in this particular case, based on the facts that I read, apparently the guy who did it was I think he cut off his ankle monitor, I think, a
Right.
couple months ago. And what the hell? I mean, what's the point of the ankle monitor if you don't go after the guys
How they supposed to
who
find
take
him?
them off? I mean, that is clear negligence. And if she sues, which she will, whether it's the city, if she sues the city or whoever is responsible for going after that guy, I hope she gets
What?
$20 million, because there's no question that they
But
should
I'm
have
sure
kicked
they were
that guy
looking for him,
out.
Phil. Once he cuts the monitor off, they can't monitor him. They don't know where he is.
Well, we don't know. I mean, put it this way, I can't say you're right, but we don't know how much effort they put into finding the guy. He did have a very violent history, so it wasn't just some guy on a DUI or something. He had a history of violent crime. And again, okay, maybe they were trying. Maybe they should have tried harder. I don't know. But I do know generally when the police want to get somebody, whether they've got a monitor or not, they usually have ways to find him. And the fact of the matter is, they had time. They didn't find him, and we know the result.
I'm going to say,
But
I'm
but
a, I'm a,
but real, can I just ask real quick, Terrence? Phil, I'm shocked a little bit. Do you have any reason to believe that the Cincinnati Police Department wasn't doing their due diligence to try to apprehend this man? Like,
Hey, I have a lot of
really, why?
I
What
do
are
have
they?
reasons because well, the guy was loose for months and they didn't get him. Now, here's what I'd like to know. If the Cincinnati Police Department says, "Oh, we had men all over the city. We were knocking on a door. We were doing all kinds of stuff." Well, okay, and we just didn't get him. But until I hear that, all I know, it's like when you go up to the plate in a baseball game, either you get a hit or you don't. And all I know is that guy wasn't picked up. And unless the Cincinnati Police Department has a real good explanation, yeah, I do fault
Um,
them.
condolences, or I don't even know what to say. I'm sorry for what happened. That's a terrible tragedy, and I'm not going to speak too much on this because I'm going to say this. If I was ever to be in a situation to where anybody was to ever wrong me in any time in life, whether it be anybody, I've got 100 lawyers in my Rolodex. The lawyer who's on top of this case, Todd McMurtry, is the best in the business. So, and what they're doing.
You mean who he represents? I'm sorry, he represents the wife.
What I'm
Is that what you're
saying,
saying?
Todd McMurtry,
Who
the
is?
same attorney who picked up the case where where the Indian was smacking in the NBC and MSNBC and all those things. He sued NBC, MSNBC, and won for the kid over in Fort Mitchell from Cub Calf. Whenever he went to it's the same attorney is picked up this case, I do believe, and they're going after. You said I think that's 100 million, and there's a list of things that they're asking for the chief. They want they want a list. She's listed. I want this. I want this. I want this. I want to know this. There's a list of what she's saying. So I'm not going to speak on it because I know that if I was ever going to get in any kind of legal stuff, I'm calling Todd McMurtry. So that's that. And so I'm not, and I'm not saying what happened, but I'm saying there's going to be some compensatory damages somehow, some way. I know she's grieving. She's grieving, and she's getting it out there like she's grieving. But after the grief is gone, he ain't gonna let this go.
Yeah, and by the way, in terms of the question, I think Nathan raised, well, are they at fault? You know, if there's one role that government should play, it's protecting its citizens. And I don't know what allowed this guy to get into the house. I don't know what kind of police presence there was in that neighborhood, but I think it's fair to say the city of Cincinnati failed this family.
Wow, that's deep. This is a very sensitive subject, and I want to follow what Tarris said and just offer my condolences. I want to make sure people hear that from me, because I just feel just torn up. When I saw some of the video, I couldn't even watch it all. Y'all know I'm very emotional. I think about when I see other people in pain, it makes me think about my family and how I might feel. So, this could have been anybody. And I think the wife is, she can say whatever she want to say. I've got nothing in any way to contradict how she feels. If that's how she feels. That's how she feels. So I'm not gonna say anything negative about her whatsoever. I think she's grieving and she's lashing out. And I don't think anybody out there cannot understand that. I'd be doing the same thing if that was my wife. I'm lashing out, I'm blaming everybody. It doesn't necessarily mean that, once you step away from it, that means that the Cincinnati police or that Mayor Aftab himself is responsible. But I understand her pain, and she has a right to use her voice any way she wants to. But she wrote, quote, or she said, quote, "Mr. Mayor," as in Aftab Pureval, "if public safety were your top priority, Patrick would still be alive." Is that fair? Because I don't think that's fair, in my opinion.
Okay, whenever and I hate to do this, but we got to go back to the mayor election coming up. Well, coming up, and I'm seeing the pieces come together in this chessboard in Cincinnati politics, and I'm watching over in Kentucky. I'm like, oh, that dude's with Bowman now. Oh, that dude's with Bowman now, and even Corey Bowman has jumped on this particular case and said, "Where's Aftab? Aftab is taking pictures with a 3-on-3 basketball tournament, and he is not engaged in this." So once again, this is an opportunity for Corey Bowman, and I'm seeing that he's asking, where's Aftab at on this situation. This is in every situation from now until November, they're going to weaponize for this mayoral race that's going up. They're going to weaponize it. So, Kevin, you weren't here earlier when I said I'm going to kind of stay out of this conversation, but I am going to interject whenever it comes to like he brought up Aftab Tharabal, and she's got a list of things that she wants. She wants answers from Aftab. She wants answers from the chief of police. She wants answers from the parole and the probation board that they didn't go after the guy for cutting off his ankle monitor. And let's get down to the nitty gritty. And I'm just going to shut up after I say this. When they talk about how Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, this is a clear case of someone who is white and influential, affluent, and has the resources and the family, friends, and the people in the constituency who's not going to let this thing die. And they're going to politicize it.
Yeah. All I know is I came back and we were talking about Corey Bowman, and I'm just like, man, the show has gone off the rails again.
No. We're talking about what happened to OTR with the woman who lost her son, who lost her husband to a stabbing. He was just making a point about, and I agree with you. You're right. If I'm Corey Bowman, yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it from a pure political, I'm running a race, yeah, he should seize upon what this woman is saying and try to make it an issue in the campaign. I could see that happening. But what do you think, Kevin? Do you the widow? She is blaming the city. She's blaming the state. She says that if Aftab really cared about public safety, her husband would be alive. I think that last statement is unfair. But Kamika asks a very interesting question. She asks, is the city of Cincinnati failing all families?
Yeah, it's tough because crime is just one of those things that is just a very difficult thing to kind of get a handle on. I mean, I understand where she's coming from, the grief, how upset she is over the circumstances that went down, and certainly there are a lot of questions. When a guy cuts off his ankle monitor and something's not done with that for several months, I don't think it's unreasonable, particularly if you are somebody who winds up being a victim at the hands of this person, to ask questions like where did the breakdown occur? And I think she definitely deserves answers for that. And I think we all deserve answers for that, because it was her husband this time, but it basically could have been anybody in the city, or multiple people who could have been victims of that. Look, it's a troubling thing when somebody can disconnect or get out of their ankle monitor and then just fly under the radar for months. So I do think I do think she has a right to ask those questions, demand answers, and I think it's definitely an indicator of chinks in the system that need to be fixed, need to be looked at. I'm not sure, like, the grounds under which this guy got parole, whether he had done his adequate time, he'd been on good behavior. What were the circumstances that led for him to have the opportunity to be on parole? I'm not saying that the parole board didn't follow procedures or whatever, but I don't know that we have enough information at this point about how all of that went down. But I don't think it's unreasonable to for this person, this widow, to want those answers. I do think it's unfair to sort of lay things all at the feet of AFTAB or anybody. I mean, look, we're talking about systemic issues that exist here, and some of the things that go beyond the power of the mayor of the city of Cincinnati to affect, right? Like, some of these are state decisions, or even, in some cases, federal laws that exist that AFTAB Pureval has legitimately no control over. Now, if you want to say, like, hey, how's this guy running around the streets and what were the police doing? Yeah, maybe that's a legitimate question, but it's a sad situation, and I think hopefully she gets the answers that she wants.
Yeah, it's a tragedy, man. I mean, I'm very emotional about it. I get emotional whenever I hear about somebody losing a family member. But like I said, it looks like this guy was a hero. 2 tours. I think he was in Iraq and Afghanistan, exemplary, came back, started a business. I never knew the man personally. I have no information, but just based upon that, and just the fact that he's a human being, has a right to live, I blame the individual. I blame the individual. That's who did it. He cut off his ankle monitor. Phil seems to think that somehow the police are to fault because they couldn't find him. And I'm like, he cut off his monitor. He's in the streets. He's in the wind. And I'm just going to assume that the Cincinnati Police Department is doing everything they can to find people that do that. They just didn't find the guy. I saw a video.
Do we? By the way, do we know if the ankle monitor was before we or I fault the Cincinnati Police? Do we know for sure what system of justice ordered? Was it? It could have been Cincinnati, but it could have been the state as well. Whoever sentenced him and included in his sentence that he has to wear the ankle monitor, that's the jurisdiction that should have been out looking for
Yeah,
him.
but again, the other thing I don't want to do is I don't want to crack down and restrict who gets parole and who gets ankle monitors, because that might unfairly punish somebody else. There's a lot of people that get parole.
Well, this guy had a series of violent offenses, so I would think to differentiate between him and some guy who steals something from a grocery store, I think there is
I
what
think
we
that's
should
fair. But since you brought it
differentiate.
up, let's talk about what he did. From what I read, he he beat somebody down. Him and some other people stomped somebody out down on the square. From what I read, and maybe
It,
he had a he might have had some other charges, but it was nothing that rose to the level of like stabbing somebody or shooting somebody.
well, you don't think stamping somebody near to death that
Well, I'm
doesn't
not
rise
saying
to
I don't
that
know if he was
level?
nearly to death or not. I know that they stomped him out.
Well, it sure sounded like it. I'm pulling it up
Yeah,
now. It
I
sure
don't know.
sounded
I mean,
like it.
from what I read, they stomped him out, and that's not the same as having a history of stabbing somebody or shooting somebody. And I blame the individual. There are plenty of people that get on parole and they don't do this. They don't cut off
Yeah.
the ankle
All
monitor
right, he
and
was
break
on.
into
He was
somebody's
on.
house and stab them. Most people don't do that.
Just clarify. He was on. He was. This is part of his parole when he was released. The guy was convicted by a jury, one count of felonious assault and one count of aggravated rioting in 2015. He struck, choked, and kicked a man multiple times per court documents. The victim suffered a broken nose, a concussion,
Yeah.
multiple contusions, and several stitches. So I would say this guy had a sufficient history to justify an
I
ankle
wasn't
monitor,
there,
if
but
not
having
more.
played street ball in Cincinnati, I've seen something similar that happen on basketball courts. People get to fighting over fouls in the last shot. I done seen people get smashed.
Can we
So I
can we
mean, it happens.
can,
You know
can
what
we?
I'm saying? That's not the same as stabbing or shooting somebody.
I want to bring up a point. That it's going to be an unpopular point, but I'm going to bring up a point of optics. Of optics, they're going to say Cincinnati, Democratic ran city, lenient on crime. Let this guy out so he can commit another crime, and they're going to weaponize this situation and use it as a political grandstand to further their agenda. So I mean, it might not be popular, but that's what's going on with this
You're right.
case. And then they're going to
And
get
you know,
paid.
You're
and you
right.
know what though, but that's a very cynical approach to politics, right? Like if we're sincerely interested in reducing crime, rehabilitation, reentry of returning citizens, we gotta talk about these issues way smarter than we do. And you gotta avoid the quick low hanging fruit of trying to take the easy political route to say this, because the knee jerk reaction on one extreme end is to say, hey, we just got to crack down on parole and da 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 da. And to Nathan's point, there are a whole lot of people who serve their time, who get parole, and who get out and try to do the right things. This is why I say that crime is tricky, because people are tricky. The reality is you just never know what somebody is going to do. Like, I think it's ridiculous to suggest but there's this narrative out there that somehow or another the police can prevent murders. Look, when somebody decides that they want to try to kill you, unless they're out there on Facebook or something like that broadcasting it, there's very few ways that you can get in front of that before the crime actually happens, because people are unpredictable. You just don't know what they're going to do. And so I think like that knee jerk extreme reaction continues to lead to the stigma that prevents returning citizens, people who have made mistakes but who have done their time and are trying to get out. The knee jerk to that, to where just nobody should get parole or we got to crack down, it further stigmatizes those people
I don't think
No,
anybody's saying
no. But
that. I
I'm
just noticed
responding.
that
I'm
this guy.
responding to what Tarris was saying about the politics, the politicization, because that's
Yeah, I
exactly what
understand.
the politicization of situations like this
Okay, the
does.
guy's ankle monitor was cut off in February. He cut it off in February.
Yeah.
February. And we are now, what, in June? And again, I don't even know. We need to find out who was monitoring it. I am guessing that it is the
Parole
Ohio
board.
Parole Board. And I will not, I can't, I'm just guessing here. I can't say, but I will bet when they check up on this that whoever got that found out and was parole officer, whoever it was, I'm betting they didn't jump on it and make sure the Cincinnati cops were out looking for the guy. I'm just betting from what I have observed over the years that it slipped
Underfunded. It's
through
going to
the
be an
cracks.
underfunded situation where
And
they don't have the right amount of manpower and something like that. They'll be like, they'll
It's
be like,
maybe
oh,
it may
it's
just
like,
be
oh, we didn't,
well,
we
and
didn't
and
see
and
the crack.
that's what needs to be looked at, like, right? Like, this is where the conversation needs to be going. Like, instead of politicizing things and saying who's soft on crime and who's tough on crime and that all that crap, what we need to be looking at is where the systemic breakdowns took place, and are there flaws in the system, or to Phil's point, do you just got some incompetent people who are running it that need to be replaced? Like, that's the level, I think, of the nuanced and the smart conversation that I hope to see happens, versus just sort of this knee-jerk political response, just to Terrace's point, to create optics or a narrative that doesn't actually serve to solve the problem.
And they got 5 months, and I fail to believe that they're going to do the right thing, Kevin. I don't think they will. I think they're going to politicize this thing, and they only have 5 months. It's going to take 5 months it'll take years for this trial to go down, and the grief will go down with the victim's wife. The grief will go down, but like I'm saying, Tommy Murtry, he's not going to let this thing go. They're going to, for 5 months, they're going to keep it alive, at least just to politicize it, because you got 5 months from here till November. Everything is at stake right now, and the more that the Democratic side sits back and says, "Oh, we got this, we got this, we got this," from the outside looking in, I'm seeing it slip, and you might win. But it's not going to be this. If he sits back and doesn't do anything, they're like the Hyde Park thing. It's 10,000 potential votes. This situation, the boy is from Kentucky. So, and I'm seeing Kentuckians rally. I'm telling y'all, it's not going. It's and the people in the chat be like, "Oh, he's crazy, he's crazy, he's crazy." Watch. It's going to, the results in this is going to be a completely different. And every time something happens, every time Mr. Paraval does not say anything, or he sits back and he doesn't say anything, that just gives more offense. And that's what I'm trying. I'm on the outside looking in.
So I'm looking at it from like the I don't know, maybe like a class lens. Like, there's a lot of people who unfortunately, tragically, has lost their lives, have been the victim of a homicide and or maybe even a murder. And there's been a lot of families who have asked for questions. It'll be interesting to see how the city reacts to this. We're talking about white people that appear to have some money, as opposed to when black people, their sons and daughters coming up, missing and dead, and they have a lot of demands. It'll just be interesting to see if it's going to be dealt with differently. It may be the same. I'm just putting it out there.
Can I say this one last time before we move on to the next subject? If any offense that I felt that I was going to call counsel for, the first person who I would call is the person who is on this case.
Rachel writes, until he has a run-in, they can't find him. Right. I mean, until something happens, or, most people get caught when they're on a run. Most people get caught because they're in a vehicle, either in the passenger side, or they're driving a vehicle, or on a bike. 9 times, anybody will tell you, if you're running from the law, stay off of any kind of, don't get on the bus, don't get in a car at all. Because once you do, anything can happen.
Well, as we've said, let's just find out what was done and whether they even alerted the local police. I mean, like Kevin said, let's just get the facts on that and find out if somebody dropped the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that. I think that's a fair thing to say. But until then, I just don't think it's fair to assume that the ball was dropped. That's all I'm saying. Like, we don't know. Like, the police are not supermen. They're human beings. I'm sure that if they were looking for this guy, if they knew where this guy was, they would have picked him up, because that's what they do.
Okay, I'd be curious. I'd be curious if the state of Ohio notified him and
But don't they
about it.
normally
We'll
notify? I
just have
mean,
to
in a
find
situation
out. But
like
I
that?
wouldn't assume. I wouldn't
I mean,
assume.
once they find out that the monitor isn't moving, it's like, oh, the monitor is stationary. That means he must have cut it off. I'm sure this happens all the time. I'm sure they've got a process where they quickly alert local authorities so that local authorities can be aware of it. I mean, again, I'm not in law enforcement. That just makes sense to me. I'm just not going to assume that they didn't do their job. Like Kevin said, hell, if somebody wants to do something to an elected official, they're going to come get you. You know, you can't, the police, these patrols do not prevent these crimes. They might deter it somewhat, but if someone is determined to come into your house, they're going to try to come into your house, and the police are not going to arrive until after the crime has already been committed. That's just the way it works, to Kevin's point.
Yeah,
And
well,
can I, can
perhaps one of the easier, maybe one of the easier solutions in kind of looking at this is how is it? And I'm not even saying that it's like so easy, but clearly it's easy enough to cut off or get rid of these ankle monitors. That perhaps something needs to be looked at in terms of the technology. And I get that there's always people who are trying to figure out, workarounds and ways to get around it, but maybe that's something else that they need to be looking at is that if it's fairly easy to cut off or get rid of these ankle monitors, maybe there needs to be some looking into technology that makes that a little bit more challenging for some of these cats to be able to cut that off and get that off in the way that this guy did. I'm not saying that that's the cure all, but certainly that seems like a bit of low hanging fruit that people should be looking at. That these ankle monitors seem like they're kind of an easy get around in some cases.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, unless you're going to put a ball and chain on somebody, I think there's always going to be an element of trust with these monitoring systems, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And if people cut it off, they got to deal with the consequences. I saw the guy when he showed up in court, and there's no way I can diagnose somebody's mental state or whatever, but I'm just wondering if mental illness is an issue here.
or drugs. I want to see. I would request a
Or drugs.
toxicology report. I'd like to see exactly what he was on.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure if the video's out or not, or quite yet. But that's going to be interesting when they release the video of how they how they got and the state that he was in. What I mean, that's going to tell a lot.
Yeah, got your message. Yeah, well, Phil, that's all I got. We're almost at 3:00, man. I don't want to keep you guys more than 2 hours. I know you're very, very busy, and I really appreciate it. Cruther writes, mental illness was my first thought. Yeah. And you know what I thought? And again, in no way that woman can say whatever she want to say. In no way am I contradicting her or criticizing her in any way, but there was no mention of like mental health services in her post, right? Because to me, I'm thinking, do we have a gap in our mental health services? But that's just me thinking about it. So
Absolutely.
like the best thing that can happen is that, maybe the authorities just take another look at their system to see if there's any way they can do things better. And maybe that's the best we can look for. Because crime and murders, unfortunately, homicides are going to happen. Not to lessen it, this man deserves his day in court, and if he's found guilty, whatever happens, happens. That's on him. But a very,
Yeah,
very sad story. Sad story. I just hate it. Every time I think about it, I'm just close to tears, man. Just thinking about that woman, because I'm thinking how I would feel if I lost my wife suddenly. I'm done.
Right
I'm
next
done.
to you, right next to
Right
you,
next to me,
and
I'm done.
then being handcuffed and interrogated to make sure you're not the person who did it. Come on.
Yeah, but the police. Listen.
Nathan, I've been like interrogated, but I've been to do that situation for. It's not fun,
Yeah, I've been there too. But I'm just saying, like, in a situation like that, the police show up. They don't know whether she did it or somebody else did it.
Exactly. Yes.
Like,
I agree
so,
with you on that.
it is uncomfortable, and because she's a widow and she lost somebody, it's like, how could you do that? But from the police standpoint, I'm like, they just showed up. They don't know who is who and what is what. And so, customarily, what do? They handcuff everybody, they sit you there, and they walk through the scene and try to figure things out. And once they ascertain that you're not a threat or you're not a primary suspect, well, then they release you and they talk to you. That happens all the time.
It happened to me, man. I promise it happened to me. It was wild.
Yeah, terrible, but you wish you wasn't treated that way. But I mean, if you're the first people on the scene, they don't know. They can't take somebody's word for it. I mean, typically, I don't know, when you watch these television shows about murders, they say that when a spouse is killed, it's typically the other spouse, right? So that's probably how they were looking at it, like, maybe she had a problem with her husband. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but that's all I got, guys. Any last words? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
No, I just make a
Yeah, I
I just
got
make a
one.
small observation about that conversation that we just had, and I think this is what is ultimately challenging in the times, the situations that we live in, and how police do things. Like Nathan, you were awfully usually somebody who's a barbarian on the police. Bruh, you were sounding like Ken Corber right there for a minute. Like you was the president of the FOP, man. Kind of like
I thought you were going to
just
say he was sounding like. I thought you were going to say he
nah,
was
man.
sounding like me,
He
which would be
sounded
a
he
real
sounded better
insult
than
to
you
him.
feel. I mean, he sounded like if I was a member of Cincy Blue
Oh,
right now, I would have that
hey,
cut from
hey.
Nathan Ivy running on a loop on our Facebook page right now, brother, because you made a strong case for the police and their
Oh,
work, which
oh.
generally runs counter to how you do. And I'm
No,
not.
it doesn't.
I'm having a little
But
bit
that's
of
where you're
fun
wrong,
with
Kevin.
it.
It does not run counter to what I say about the police. It does not.
I'm having a little bit of fun with you. I say that to say in all seriousness though that a lot of times these situations and things are difficult, and I think we do, depending on our vantage point, depending on the situations and the circumstances, we come down harder or lighter on police in some situations, and it's just to say again, I'm not saying that they're correct in every situation. Lord knows I have had more than enough things to say, but I do think it's a recognition that they do have a very difficult job to try to do. And in every situation, depending on whether you're the victim or how close you are to it, your perception of how they do the job can be very different based on a lot of different factors. And so, you know, it is what it is, but it does help us to think about, you know, how we view all of these police situations and the unfortunate crime that we're dealing with in the city.
I
And see,
want
that's
to.
one of the biggest misconceptions about people that are not afraid to voice their displeasure about what they see from police when they see it, is the idea that you can't be fair. I can't speak for anybody else, but I try to look at the situation. I mean, the historical context is already there, but I try to look at the situation. If it makes sense, it makes sense. If it don't make sense, it don't make sense. And I don't care who it is, police, mailman, NFL, it makes no difference. You know
I
what
want
I'm
to.
saying?
I want
Right
to.
is right, wrong is wrong. And in this case, I mean, why would I assume anything other than before I get any information? But like to Phil's point, if they do an investigation and some stuff come out, well, then the stuff comes out, and it is what it is. We deal with it then.
I wanted to clarify something to you real quick. Like whenever I was downtown one time with a friend of mine, and we got pulled over by police officers. There was 14 police officers. They pulled us over at gunpoint and it had us by gunpoint. And as soon as they said, "I'm with the Cincinnati Homicide Department," I was like, "Cool, I ain't no killer." I let them take me in, handcuff me, interrogate me. Told him, gave him all the information. Me and my white boyfriend that I was with scared him to death. But I was just saying that. I mean, like sometimes it does work out in your favor, especially just go through the process. And that's why I could kind of understand what you were talking about. Like when she got handcuffed, when they don't know in the situation, they take who they until the investigation's over. And after they told me the evidence, they were like, there was a homicide last night. A black man was driving in a white truck that looked like yours. So we automatically assumed it was you. I was like, good police work, fellas. Wasn't me, let me out. They took my truck, fingerprinted it all over, and I used it as a teachable moment. I took my sons down to the impound and showed my sons what happens. I was like, this is what happens when you deal with certain stuff. They'll take your cars, they'll fingerprint it, they'll do everything that you got to do. They have to do while the case is going on. So I just want to kind of clarify that to where I was not talking like I was trying to sympathize with the lady for being handcuffed. And I said, I've been through that too. I wanted to clarify what happened so it wasn't just out there.
I think you should have sympathized with the lady. I mean, look, let's just be real. You've just witnessed your husband get murdered. And I mean, come on now. I can tell you that if circumstances was a little bit different, the reaction to this might be a little bit different. And I'm just gonna say the reality is you've just witnessed your husband be brutally murdered. The police come in and they handcuff you. Come on now. You're not, none of us on here are going to respond positively to that and be like, oh, the police is just doing their job. No, you're probably already hysterical and frantic based on what you just witnessed. And now the police got you handcuffed like you did it. Come on, Lance. Now let's just be real. Nobody is going to respond to that favorably, even though everything that you said is true. The police are just doing their job. But the reality is, I doubt she responded to it favorably. I doubt any of us would have responded to it favorably. And I don't think she would have been outlined in the least. And I would sympathize with that with any person who just witnessed a loved one get killed, and then you're going to be handcuffed and questioned, interrogated by the police like you did it. Come on, man.
Yeah,
I
happens
just
to
ain't
black
I
people
just
all the
ain't gonna
time.
say I just ain't gonna say that. I understand that may be the job and they're trying to sort things out, but you definitely would have to sympathize with somebody who did not respond well. And I could even see again in a situation change the skin color on that, and it could, and the reaction could turn out a lot worse
Yeah,
in
but
some
that's
situations.
precisely why I'm saying what I'm saying. I mean, I've seen this played out with black people all the time. Police come on the scene, they're trying to control the scene. They don't know if she can, for all they know, if they don't handcuff her, once they turn their back, she might plunge a knife into their back. These officers don't know. They have no idea. They just showing up. They got a call. They don't know who's who. It's a lot of people out there that they kill a spouse and then call the police and try to get over it. So I get it. And I understand her being upset, but if you're that officer, you trying to make sure you don't get shanked, you don't get stabbed because you don't know. And that's the brutal reality of those kind of situations. And I feel for her, but it happens in the black community all the time.
Absolutely. But I feel, and again, I don't want to minimize what this is by taking the conversation in a different direction. So I'll just leave it at this. I'll just leave it at the point of saying what you just articulated talks about the difficulty and the decisions that police have to make in a moment where they're trying to figure out situations. And in some cases, we don't want to hear that. And in other cases, we'll listen to it. And the only point I'm making is it just underlines the complexity of the job that they do in the situations. And again, there's sometimes you're gonna look at it and you're gonna say that don't make no sense to me. And other times you'll look at it and you can say, I can kind of understand it. But officers do have a difficult job and they're not showing up a lot of times on people's best day.
Yeah, but that don't give you the right or to shoot somebody as that's a fleeing suspect and shoot them in the
I
side and shoot them in the
I
back though.
didn't say that it
Yeah.
did.
I
I didn't
mean,
say that it did.
yeah, you did because that's what'll happen. People say, "Oh, it's so quick. It was only 6 seconds." I mean, what would you have done? Well, I mean, you're right on that, but all we can go by is what your officer actually did. So, I mean, I've seen people where a car gets pulled over. It's two or three people in the car. Everybody's handcuffs on the side of the road.
Yeah, sitting
I've
down.
seen that happens all the time.
Happens every day to
Everybody's
me.
handcuffed. I'm not even driving and I'm handcuffed because, and I think that goes too far, but the police don't know. That's what they say. We don't know who you are, what you are, what you got.
Right.
So could you imagine a situation you get called and you got a man stabbed to death? They don't know what this woman did. They don't know her like that. So what are they gonna do? Handcuff you, ascertain, make sure the situation is cool. That makes perfect sense to me. That just makes sense to me. And I feel for her. And nothing's gonna bring her husband back. Again, to me, he seems like he was a hero. We lost something in Cincinnati with this man's passing. So, it's just very, very tragic. Very tragic. So
You
wish
know,
her
you
nothing
know,
but
there,
condolences.
Yeah, So I've been watching lately. There's a YouTuber. His name is the Civil Rights Attorney, or lawyer. It's either lawyer or attorney. But at any rate, this is a guy who has an extensive history in sort of civil rights litigation. It's actually really good. And a lot of things that he does is he shows videos of police encounters with individuals and talks about sort of like what your rights are, how police may have violated these people's rights in the videos and things of this nature. Sometimes they're high profile cases that you've heard about. Sometimes they're cases that you've never heard of. But if you're looking for something interesting to watch, I usually don't stump and promote for people, but I've been watching this guy a lot lately and it's really good. And I'm learning a lot about laws. And of course, every different state, has different, slightly different laws and that sort of thing. But it's really good to sort of look at, like, what are your constitutional rights? What are police allowed to ask you? What information do you have to give up? And then in some cases, you can see how sometimes they escalate, situations, uh, you know, uh, in truly unreasonable ways. And so it's just this is a good information source. Like if you really want to, if you're into that kind of thing, you want to learn a little bit about your rights and that sort of thing, I would encourage you to check them out.
You said civil rights lawyer?
Yeah, it's the Civil Rights Lawyer, I think is the
Okay.
name of the YouTuber.
All right. With that, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We're planning to be back on Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a great rest of your Tuesday and rest of your week, and we will talk soon. Have a great day. Thank you.